So I grew up in a family of boys. My son, I've got three boys, an adopted one and two others. And the eldest of my birth children, Samson, he is the seventh generation of only males, obviously through my father's line. And so there's very strong kind of male theme.
Chance of that? Have you ever worked out the probability of that?
I've no idea. Someone might come right in. We won the world record or something. But he, so I grew up in this sort of quite male environment, and then I was involved with the Royal Navy for a little bit as an officer. Obviously, there's women in the Navy, but for me, it felt like a male environment. I played sport in a male environment, and then went to work in a boarding school where I worked in a boarding house with boys and was their housemaster for a while. And so I have this sort of strong influence of men, but at the same time, this idea of men are entirely flawed in many areas, and so the sense by which all is not well amongst men. So that's just that kind of growing theme, if you like, was just almost like compost in the soil of my life. It's just been there from my own experience as well. And I've got three brothers, obviously sons, and just that sense of the beauty and the brilliance of men, but also the brokenness. And we know in society, you don't have to go very far or read very deep into the news before you find problems that basically men are causing. And so this sense by which always inside me, there's been a desire to want to do something about helping men.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd love to hear a bit more about what that was like growing up in such a male-dominated environment. And like one of the things that we focus on at Mercy through our course is generational patterns. So it's understand that actually a huge driver for us in terms of the things that we struggle with actually have their roots in the people that have gone before in our family lines. And so for you, growing up in that environment, I'd love to hear both the good and bad of how much was mental health talked about? Was there a certain expectation upon people as to what it would mean to be a man? Did you feel that growing up? Did you see it in your father, in his father? Love to hear a bit about that.
So let me take a step wider away from mental health so I don't narrow too much of the story in terms of what I'm thinking. But I think you're absolutely right to highlight that male environments can become toxic very quickly. They can also be very positive. So I had a bit of both. Growing up with my brothers, we were adventurous. My father's very intentional about allowing us to have adventure and taking us on adventures. My mum was sort of complicit because I think she felt overwhelmed, like outnumbered, outvoted. And so we were very adventurous. We wrestled a lot. We were actually encouraged to sort of compete or to challenge. Maybe now looking back, I don't know how helpful that was from a mental health perspective. But my dad also was aware that we really didn't have, and he also didn't have and doesn't have that much experience with women outside of a romantic context. There's a sense by which women as sisters, women as daughters, just is absent from that narrative.
That's interesting.
What we used to have as growing up, we didn't have pocket money. We used to have a thing called review, where each month we'd have to set some objectives, and then you'd be rewarded. And it started at 20p, and then it went to 50p, and then £1 for hitting the objectives that we set. So it was I think my dad was trying to teach us to plan ahead and to meet goals. The objectives we had to have was with God and with Him, so father, son, and then another was with girls. So every month we had to invite a girl into the family context from the age of about 10 onwards. And 20p if you did it. And I actually met my wife, Emiko, who I've been married to. We've been together since we met at 12. We've been together since we were 14. We met at 12 because I invited her to play tennis with my family. And she famously says that as she left the tennis court, having beaten us all at tennis, and she well and truly beat us, that she thought, I will never speak to that dysfunctional family again. What a bunch of misfits. And obviously then we re-engaged again or met again at 14. We've been going out ever since and married when we're 20. But the reality of that is that she saw a lot of truth in that this all male environment was also quite negative around our inexperience with women was also played out, and we just didn't know how to behave. But the over competitiveness, we were all deeply shocked that she beat us. She literally beat, from my youngest brother through to my father, she's thrashed everyone at tennis one at a time, picked us all off. And I remember the moment. I just remember being humbled and realizing women were brilliant. They're really very good at stuff. And how that hadn't landed with me until I was 12, and even then it took a while for it to really bed in. That's a bit of concern. And so I look at that again from that mental health, mental well-being. I think this world where it's one or other of the gender focus is a real problem for any human being growing up.
And some real credit to your dad then for spotting that and recognizing that needs to change. I think you might be the only family I've ever heard of where the parent has paid their sons to invite girls to stuff. If my kids are listening, like, don't have any expectations, please.
Look, it was far worse than that. You had to pay 20p to watch TV, and often you weren't allowed to watch what you wanted to watch anyway. I think the A Team was about as risky as it got. We had to spend 15 minutes a day with Dad and come up with something that we had to organise for 15 minutes. You had 4 sons. So it was a lot of effort in this review.
When you, I mean, we'll probably get onto this stuff later, but while we're on it, when you think about some of those things that we're instigated at such an early age, how have they informed your adult life? Because I mean, even things like that idea of having to be intentional about spending time with your parents, and actually for you to be the one to figure out what that's going to look like. I mean, that's an incredible skill to give a child, because how many of us just take our parents completely for granted and expect them to do everything? And we don't really learn until we're into our late adult years that actually they're now our peers and we need to think of them as peers. So yeah, how did some of those things inform your life?
Yeah, the upbringing was super intentional. My parents had very strong views on what good parenting was. I think they hark back to names like James Dobson, I think, was one of the. But anyway, there's old sort of family books that people used to read about, and Raising Boys, another one, Biddulph, and so a lot of that was deep in them. But also, I think my dad knew that his capacity was limited. 4 sons, working from home often as well. And so I think it was his way of saying he wasn't going to get round to spending 15 minutes a day with each of us. So we would have to take responsibility for it. It did feel odd. And even now with my boys, I think I would be reluctant to push it back round onto them, because I think it's more my responsibility. But I like what you said. It did teach us each that, look, we're one of 4, and so we don't have any specific louder voice than another, and nor do we have that kind of entitlement to demand time at any moment. Actually, we have to work it in, we have to plan it, we have to think of things to do and be creative. And also, I think my father would argue that it meant we then came up with ideas of things we wanted to do, so he was able to engage with us at our level. So I think there were pros and cons.
Yeah. What you mentioned at the beginning, that there was both good and bad things about growing up in an all-male environment. What were some of the things that were a real challenge, and you've had to kind of over time, either through your childhood, through your adult years, actually reframe things or think differently because of growing up in such an all-male environment?
Well, I think I'll focus on 2 things that spring to mind. The first is the competitiveness, and it's not just that it was competition; it's that macho competitiveness.
Yeah.
Often strongly. I'll come back to that. But and the second one is also around being able to speak openly, cleanly with one another without that sense of that also becoming aggressive or challenging. So take the first one. It was a very physical environment. We used to wrestle all the time, build dens in the woods, climb trees, jump off stuff and break things. And my parents used to be very happy about that. I think often encouraged that. I think adventure was a big part of our upbringing. But I know for sure, for me, that really fitted who I was anyway as a human. Yeah. Always been physically quite big, and so physically it was easy for me to be strong because I was already strong. I know for one of my other brothers in particular, but 2 others, but one particular, that that physical side was not helpful.
Yeah.
And I think that he felt pressured a lot to be tougher than he is, or more courageous than he wants to be, and also to compete in an arena that was basically already weighted against him physically. So I'm definitely not sure I think that was healthy. And I think with a girl, the sister, we would have been very different. And I think linked to, we also didn't learn language to fall out well, to disagree well, and that we're struggling with that to this day. There's big kind of breaks in our family connection because of the inability to challenge cleanly without the beef behind it of, if you're going to say that to me, I'm saying this to you, and man to man we're going to kind of front up. It's that kind of nonsense that we just never been able to move beyond because we don't have it in our heritage, we don't have it in our language. And that, to your point earlier, I do see that going back generationally. I see it through father's generations as well, the inability to actually just disagree well.
And for your brother, I know you can't speak on his behalf, it's not really fair, but I would be interested to know for him what that looked like when he struggled in that environment, because I can kind of relate to that, because I think for me, one of my big journeys is with the idea of masculinity is I've never really aligned myself to how masculinity is projected and what it should be. And so I've never quite known how to fit in those environments. And I've always steered clear of men's activities at church. It just doesn't resonate, and it seems to often be driven by like high competition, a lot of bravado, and so for your brother, if you think he wouldn't mind you sharing, how for him, what was the impact of growing up in an environment where he was surrounded by that kind of culture?
Well, I'm totally with you on it. The impact for him was also an impact on me. And so let me tell you what I know for sure, that he's very creative. He's an excellent musician, a brilliant dancer, brilliant at football because he was very jinxy. But I played rugby. He's not into rugby, and I know for sure that he felt that it was always sort of last place. And he was definitely bullied. I bullied him. He and I've said sorry to each other. Well, I certainly said sorry to him about that. But the reality is that side of masculinity in him was crushed. There's a beautiful essence of masculinity that is found in gentleness, which is what I think we're the phrase gentleman from, but we've forgotten. And I think the reality is that he expressed masculinity in a way that I probably didn't dare. He did ballet for a while and jazz tap. I remember that. And he got ribbed mercilessly at school for that. And I would have joined in and said, what is this? This is not a kind of male thing. And now I look back and I realize what a mistake that was. But also not because it's any less male or any more male. It's just another expression of male. And my view, your question from a bigger perspective now, looking back and working obviously as I do with men, is masculinity is effectively almost anything, which is partly why we've tried to redefine it in our book, Responsibility of the Authentic Man. Because when you want to become the authentic man, you have to be not just the true version of yourself, i.e. you do you, but actually you have to be true to yourself. If you like something, you need to say, I like that. And because you're a man, it becomes male. The moment you say, that's me, you've then owned it, and now it's male. And I think the risk we have in society these days, we've made things binary in the sense of saying that's a female thing. Therefore, if you're a male and you like female things, you must be more akin to being a female. I just think you're a man that likes those things that others attribute to being female. So you could just take pink and blue. I know a friend of mine used to run a toy shop, and they used to have the aisles were pink for girls stuff and blue for boys stuff, and then he was trying to help people mostly to work out which side you want to go. But nowadays he's been told off and told that's absolutely wrong. And right in the sense that you could get plenty of boys who say, I like pink, so I'm going down the pink aisle, and then finding nothing for me that I want to play with in there, or maybe loads for me to want to play with in there. The mistake then when we say, okay, so if you like that side, then you must be more akin to that side, I think that's a load of nonsense.
We're creating rules, aren't we, when we do that then mean people have to conform. So in order to be masculine, I have to conform to this set of rules. To be feminine, this set of rules. But that's not authentic. How have you reshaped that for your own children?
Great question. I hope I have. We should ask them. I'll ask them. I think conversation is crucial. I think one of the biggest ways to unlock any kind of truth is to talk about it and to discuss it and to almost like pull it apart. The cows, when they eat grass, they chew it, don't they? They chew the cud. I actually think before we swallow anything, we should just chew it over. And what with my children is to say, how do you feel about that? What are your thoughts around that? And it's a good question, because if you know my family, and Will, who you said was just on, he knows me well. He'll know that, again, often by chance or by luck, I happen to be fit into quite sort of stereotypical male things. I can do them generally quite well. And so for my sons growing up with a dad who's reasonably competent at that kind of stuff, that's also a challenge for them, because if they want to nudge their way to the top of the competitive pile, or say the physical pile, they have to be able to do more press-ups than me or something like that. And so actually I've been really aware of that growing up, that those shouldn't be the measures of anything. It's just nonsense. They don't actually matter in any way, shape or form really at all. It's just a measure. So what we've done is try and talk with them about what they feel frightened about, what they feel afraid of and worried about, why their worry matters. We did a parenting course once called The Circle of Security. It's a brilliant course. I really recommend it. The good news is they reckon you only have to get it right 3 in 10 times. and 30% of your interactions. Yeah. So I was like, oh, I could do 3. But one of those interactions, they also talk about when children hurt themselves. You know, that instinct as an adult is to say, it's okay, it's okay.
Yeah.
And what this parenting course teaches us to say, they don't think it's okay, so now you're just becoming a liar. You can say to them, what's going on? Or I could imagine that hurts, or that must feel frightened. How do you feel? You feel frightened. I wonder, why do you feel frightened? I can imagine that's frightening, or I can imagine that's painful, or does it feel painful? So we really learned that. I don't know why that landed with us quite early on, my wife and I, but we really tried to live like that. We tried to bring that into our family style, rather than telling them, yes, no, you don't do this, you don't feel that, to say, why do you feel like that? That doesn't mean to say everything goes. My boys will tell you I'm still pretty tough and still have some quite strong values and firm views. They just know that they'll have to challenge them. And we actually sat down on holiday a few years ago. So my eldest now is nearly 19 and the youngest is just turned 14. And it must have been 5 years ago we sat down on holiday, and I said, we came clean and said, look, we've actually got to come clean with you. We've got expectations for you that we haven't really ever talked about. We actually expect you to leave home at some point. We've never told you this. We actually expect you probably to go to university if you want to carry on your education, to get a job, to earn income, to get married, to have grandchildren. I'd like to be a grandfather. I've never told you this. And so I also expect you to have a faith. I also expect you to be kind. And so we actually came up with 5 family values that we said, from now on, we're going to punish or reward you against these 5 key values, and the rest we're going to kind of overlook or ignore because you can't really worry about everything. And our 5 family values then became the kind of core foundations of the family, that we said, if you want to challenge those views, that will be okay. If you want to sort of abandon any sense of faith, you can do that. It's just you need to take us on the journey with you, because I'll especially be quite difficult to take along that path. Yeah. So if I want to leave home, I'd quite like you to go and have your own home and enjoy your life and thrive on your own. So if you want to stay at home for the rest of your life, you'll need to talk to me about that along the way, because I'm expecting you to leave. Yeah. And what we found that approach is that really unlocked in them the responsibility to also buy into the view, the kind of shared community view of healthy life. So it's not really just masculinity, but just healthy living.
So you're coaching them in essence as well through the potential anxieties attached to that, and you know, the uncertainty around it, but actually empowering them to go and be themselves.
Yeah, well, I don't know if we knew we were, but I think you're right. I think the word you use there that's super important is empowerment. I believe actually masculinity and femininity can be defined effectively as nurture and empowerment. Nurture being the feminine trait, empowerment being a masculine trait, and men and women can have strong elements of both simultaneously. So I could be a very nurturing male or a very empowering female. It's just I believe that empowerment is predominantly a male trait. And so what it's important for fathers to do, I think, is empower, say go for it, but not just go for it like I don't know if you go to the pub and you say to your mate, oh, I'm going to go and jump in that river, and they'd say, yeah, go on mate, you go for it, do what you want. And they sort of sit, I don't know if that's what do you say when you, I don't know what you say when you go to the pub, but something like that. Let's say you say you're going to jump in. Often guys empower each other by just saying, I don't really care, do what you want, I'm not interested. That's not actually empowerment. It's just kind of passivity or disinterest. Empowerment actually says, okay, you want to do that, I'll come and hold you, I'll look after your stuff while you do it, and I'll stand on the bank in case something goes wrong, and I'll keep my phone on in case we need to call the lifeguard or something. And so actually empowerment says, you go and do it and I'll support you in any way I can along the way. And I think there's something in masculinity that's been lost there. I actually think in terms of nurture, society is very good at nurturing. If you think about most of what we do is about saying, are you okay? How's your well-being? And I think one of the challenges for you guys on this call for 24 hours will be, how do we keep empowering men to find breakthrough in their mental well-being, or to find health in their mental well-being, without over-nurturing them, without allowing them to stay in that place of victimhood where they're feeling overwhelmed and staying in that place of overwhelm, or without allowing to feel too sorry for themselves and say, I'm the only person in the world who's ever gone through this. There's something about where men help each other that's really empowering, about saying, I see you, I hear you, and it matters, but you can change, and I believe in you. I'm going to walk with you in that.
Yeah. Well, do you want to take that point and kind of unpack it a bit? Because my guess is that with the work you do through XCC, and if there's any other stuff that I'm not aware of in terms of what you do with, whether it's work hat, church hat, parent hat, I don't know, but just talk us through your experience of journeying with men and how you do that, and how you do the empowerment piece. And I love how you've just phrased it, because I think often with empowerment, we often think of it as kind of a pushing away, But actually what you just described it as is a encouraging them to be themselves, but with the support structure in place. And actually, I think it's the support structure that is so missing in today's society, is that men don't really know how to have friends and make friends, and the traditional support structure you get in a village or a community has been lost. So in making that, creating that, and being intentional about that, well, it does take intentionality. It doesn't just happen anymore. We live in a society where structures around you don't just happen anymore. You have to be intentional and put them in place, and that takes vulnerability, and it takes it takes something that doesn't seem to be very common at the moment. But yeah, talk to us a little bit about XEC, about how you do some of this with men.
So the XEC stands for Extreme Character Challenge. We take I don't know, up to 200 men away at a time, maybe nearly 1,000 men a year for several, I don't know how many years I've been doing it now, nearly 10 years, I think. So lots of men. And you've basically just described, if you like, the theology or the philosophy behind what we do. You've just talked about the fact that we often don't know how to be honest with each other because there's a risk associated with that, so we don't support that. I think adventure is really lacking. We don't take that many healthy risks these days, and we don't have adventure because of the worry of getting it wrong, and then what happens, we judge everything retrospectively. So you go for it, but if you do something wrong, I'm going to come and get you. And there's that sense of like, well, we better not take a risk. We also don't know how to introduce a faith concept in it with any real weight to it. I don't think amongst men anymore. It's either your private faith that you have, or come and listen to my faith and do it my way. And so for all those reasons, really, and men, of course, as you know, they much prefer to talk side by side. So men connect side by side. We connect with that sense of walking together. Firstly, the physical journey of that is that you're moving anyway. So there's a physical sense of we've moved from the place we started to the place we're going. And so if you're having any kind of difficulty or any kind of thing in life, it's healthy to feel you're moving. Second thing is we're not looking eye to eye. So there's that awkwardness that men often feel because they're just not used to talking openly and honestly with each other. That can be a little bit alleviated by going side by side. And also that process of walking gives time for breath. I don't know if you remember watching, if you ever saw any of the or any series really, but the Peaky Blinders is the one that stood out to me, where every time they had difficult conversations in Peaky Blinders, Tommy Shelby, I think his name was, he would always take a cigarette. I remember him in the House of Commons a lot, having difficult conversations about power and about movement. And he would, just as someone asked him a very tricky conversation about to undermine his whole operation, he would take out his cigarettes. He would sort of knock the packet. He'd flick one around. He'd reach around for his lighter. He'd light one or strike a match, and it would take 3 or 4 attempts. He'd take a big draw on the cigarette, blow it out in a flamboyant way, and then give his answer. Watching that, it's not the smoking side of it, but what I love watching that was I realized that we've become so instantaneous that even this conversation, because we know that people might watch, we're trying to keep a pace to it. The reality is, if we weren't in this intense environment, we'd be trying to take our time about this sort of stuff a little bit more. We'd be thinking it through. As you said earlier from Will, we'd be going into more detail. We'd make time for a toilet break or a coffee. And so actually the wild does make that for you. It slows everything down because there really is no rush. You can go at 3 miles an hour, which is basically walking pace. Also, there's a Japanese philosopher called Koyama, and he says that love has a speed, and love moves at walking speed, which is 3 miles an hour. And he says that God moves at 3 miles an hour.
I've never heard that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, Koyama is beautiful. He wrote a book called The 3 Mile an Hour God. And his argument is that if you want to meet God, you cannot sit still and stay where you are. J. John always says, if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. If you stay here, you're not going anywhere. But if you rush on ahead to, I know exactly what's happening, I'm off, you will also miss it. Somehow you have to go at this kind of annoying, frustrating, ploddy, walking space at 3 miles an hour. And that's the place love moves. So what we do is we take men on adventures in the wild for 4 days. We take any men, all men. In fact, the wider the variety, the better, because it's beautiful if a lawyer and an ex-offender happen to be walking side by side. It's brilliant if a big guy and a small guy and a older guy and a younger guy. That's what we really need in society is men, all people connecting with each other. And so we take all sorts of guys, some who know why they're there. Some will say, okay, I've got this problem. I'm watching porn every day, or I'm stuck gambling online, or I'm in an inappropriate relationship with someone, in an inappropriate relationship with someone, or I'm not paying my taxes, whatever it might be. And the other guys will be there like, well, I just wanted a physical adventure and this is a challenge.
Yeah.
Someone else will be there, their wife signed them up or their mate told them it's the best thing they could ever do. And other guys literally just think, I don't know why I'm here, but I felt compelled to be here. And there's a whole bunch of guys there. But what will happen over that 4 days is somehow they'll start to bond with each other, bond a little, reconcile a little bit with themselves, and also remarkably reconcile with God. Even those who absolutely would say there is no God. And they might even say that at the end, but they would say something's happened. And I think what we've lost in our space is in our communities is space for men to do that. We've lost the space to be able to speak cleanly and openly about who they are and what they're about without feeling condemned, judged, or chastised or ridiculed. Banter. It kills healthy conversation. And we just don't have room for it. No one really talks about what car they drive or what football team they support or their golf swing or whatever it is that men often compete on. They don't really bother because now it's about what really matters, which is what's going on inside me. I'm worried. I'm frightened. I'm feeling I've been stupid. I feel alone. Got no friends. All of that comes out on an XCC.
Amazing. Have you ever been on XCC?
Not yet, but I'm going to.
Yeah. James, this is the kind of thing that historically I would have gone, heck no. Like that sounds like my worst nightmare. I'm being honest. So, like, sell it to me as a man that kind of doesn't often kind of put myself in that place of going, yes, adventure. I guess I'm just trying to think myself. I'm taking a moment's pause. As you said, like, what is it that I would need to be sold on? I think I would need to be sold on that there's a place for me. And I think that's what I would need to be sold on. And I reckon you can speak into that.
That's beautiful. Because I was about to give you a different answer. The answer I was going to give you for sounds like my worst nightmare. My answer to that more superficially, before you justify why you're saying that, it's my worst nightmare. I hate running them. I've done it for 10 years and they're horrible. Guys have nearly died. Most people say it's the hardest thing they've ever done in their lives. But we have I think we did some study, 98.7%. I hope I've got that stat right. It's something high 90% say it's the best thing they've ever done in their life, alongside the birth of their children in 4 days. Why? And so the reality is that we often don't know what's best for us, and the choices we make, if we repeat them often, are the ones that get us into trouble we end up in. And so I've never lived before. I don't know about you. I don't know what I'm doing. Literally, I don't know. Tomorrow, I'm trying to live my best life based on what I know. But the reality is, often when I make mistakes, I will be the guy that created that mistake. So if I carry on trusting me as being the definitive answer on what's right or wrong for me, I will keep making the same mistakes and maybe have the same successes. So the first thing I think beneficial about an XCC is it does take men out of their comfort zone to a place they don't want to go. The second thing, to your superficial answer, is comfort is a killer. I think comfort's one of the greatest killers of our time. And I love your environment at the moment. It's so beautiful, so comfortable. And what we love is that mix between the outdoors and the indoors and this easy life. And often Instagram and social media points and charges us towards this kind of higher comfort life. But the reality is we don't really need comfort. We need challenge, because the greatest victories come after the greatest battles. And if you haven't struggled, there's nothing to win. There's no victory. It's just literally handed to you day after day. So XCC does provide something of a re-struggle, of a struggle, and even the hardest times in their life will say they valued the struggle they had on XCC over and above the struggle of losing their job or getting divorced or what might be. But to your justifying point, I love that. And that's why we want guys like you to come on XCC, because the reality is there is no one size of masculinity. And it's absolute fallacy. You'll find on XCC, and thousands of guys have done this, and you can ask any one of them if you meet them. I am very, very, very deliberate. There is zero competition on XCC, and also there is no sense, I don't think, of what, if you like, ultimate masculinity. That's a wrong phrase. What, like, better masculinity? There is no grading. There's no way of knowing. So sometimes a team will arrive at a campsite early, and they'll get there and they expect us to congratulate them. And then the team that comes in last might expect to be the last team. For us, it's irrelevant. Everyone just ignores everyone. There's nothing to do with anything like that. And the team that are last often have had the hardest struggle. They're the ones we tend to want to celebrate. But the reality is that actually our male life is spent so often with this comparison of who's bigger, who's tougher, who's stronger. I just don't believe that that's how God looks at us. I think he sees each as individual, a bit like the flowers, wildflowers on a mountainside. The reality is there's so many of them, they're so different. How could you possibly say what's better than another? So we need guys who don't want to be there because they want to reject that kind of typical masculine view. As much as the very typical masculine guy happens to be there, he might just embody that physically. I mean, I told you, I just happen to be reasonably big. And so I've just, it's not my fault. I can't do anything about it. I just need to be aware of it. But if I wanted to be less of a presence in a room, I have to work quite hard at that. And so the reality is actually we need each other to contrast. We need to learn off each other. Just as you talked earlier about my brother, Nathan, he really taught me that lesson about what it's like to be brave, being different, to be brave, being gentle. So anyway, that's why we need guys like you to come. So I'd love to see that.
That's James. You've sold me. It sounds great. I imagine on the days. I imagine there's kind of. Do you see a pattern? I can imagine like it's kind of like day one, you arrive and you think you know what you're going to get out of it, and you think, I'm going to love the challenge, and you think this is what I'm going to talk to people about, and you come with that bravado. I'm imagining it as a backpack full of stuff, and you kind of go, yeah, I'm here. But then as the day goes on, the kind of bits start to chip away, and then eventually, is there a point where kind of this is when actually people start to be their authentic selves? And so 2 questions. One, do you see that pattern, and kind of what does that typically look like? But then the next question I'd be really interested to hear is when people get to that point, I can almost imagine that kind of like everything that I've just said, there's an assumption as to who's going to be there, what other kind of people are going to be there, what it is that they're going to be bringing, how they're going to be presenting themselves. But that is also just prejudice in the same way. So I'd love to hear, like, what do people discover is actually the common ground once you strip all that back, and actually with, it doesn't matter who you're shoulder to shoulder with, we're connecting over the same stuff, and actually there must be some common themes in amongst that.
You're absolutely right. So there are some pivotal moments that happen every time. They surprise me every time because I'm sure it's not going to work each time. I just think it's a crappy long walk. But the reality is every time it's mind blowing what happens. I cannot tell you. I can't even begin. If anyone's watching this or listening to this, and both of you guys, now I feel you're warm. I'm going to send you an invite after this, and you'll both be my guests for free. But the reality is, we need men to come because we need men to go through this kind of fire to realize what God does in those moments, and also what we of in those moments as men to each other, not just for ourselves. It's not just self-help in the sense of I found a courage in me. The reality is I actually found courage in you. We had a guy, I did a thing, and actually this links to what I just said to you. Both of you seem to be warm, therefore I do a thing with the men where we talk about our yeses and our nos. Often as men we say yes and then behave like no, or we say no and behave like yes. No, I won't drink too much tonight, and then I do. No, I won't watch porn next week, and then I will. Or yes, I will be there to help you on your birthday, and don't turn up, or whatever it is. So we do a thing where we say, right, yes and no, and it revolves into guys just jumping into some water. Sometimes do it. And last time a guy jumped in and then just drowned, promptly, literally went straight down. Now we have had this before, and we were a bit ready for it. So we got our third line. One of my guys jumped in, pulls him up from the bottom, but he went straight down, pulled him up. He got out, and I said to him after, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm fine." I said, "What was that like?" He said, "Well, you said I can't swim. I mean, you said say yes and do your yes, say no and do your no." I said yes, so I was going to do it. And I didn't want to tell anyone before because I felt I should trust. It was a lesson in trust. And I knew you guys would have my back. Now, I find that that guy, and this has happened 4 or 5 times, so it's not just that one time, but I reckon those men, if I wish I remembered their names, they're probably the most brave. You could say stupid, but I think there's something very deep going on there that's brave. Yeah. I don't think I would ever trust. I literally think if I'd said yes, I would still say, but I can't swim. Please be aware, guys, just so you know, and I'd have slid in gently near the side. He leapt in and just literally sunk like a stone. And I felt like in those moments, there's something around masculinity where he just knew these other men would save him. Now, I don't have that confidence in masculinity in our communities. Generally, it's like, nah, if I sink, you're going to abandon me. If I go down, you're going to speak badly of me. We're going to tell a story about, oh yeah, I used to know that about him. He's terrible. And we're going to kind of talk shame on each other at those moments. And so it's quite beautiful that happens around men. But also to your question of what do we connect over? I always get asked what I think a real man is, and you boys embody a little bit. I talk about big muscles, strong guy, and then big beards and tattoos and carburetor changing. I don't think any of that matters in terms of masculinity, pipe smoking, whatever it is. I think masculinity, real men, really beautiful men, are men that can admit when they're wrong, say sorry, and ask for help. And that is where the men can XCC. Now, that's a bit of a spoiler for those coming. And the reason we don't talk much about XCC, a bit like Fight Club, is you don't talk about it, because if I tell men, by the way, on this XCC, you're going to admit when you're wrong, say sorry, and ask for help, most of them will say fine. But actually, a guy me recently, he's quite a famous guy. I'm not going to say who he is because many of you will know who he is. He wrote to me and said, James, I do really want to do an XCC, but the reason I've said no to you all these years is because I knew that you would find me out, not me personally, but that would find in an area that I've now just been found out in. But every time I said no, and I laughed it off and walked away. But inside I said, that will expose me. And that's is that often, guys, we're running a racket. We don't want to be exposed. And so we're doing all we can to hide, to, again, run away from admitting we're wrong, saying sorry, and asking for help. And I see that happen. It's the most beautiful thing you can ever see. I remember one guy, I think his name was John, who was a Geordie from a very, very tough background in Newcastle. I think he'd definitely been to prison. I think he might have come straight from prison, but he'd been in prison a long time. I think 13 years he'd been in prison. And he walked to the front of the group at the end to tell a story about what had happened. And in front of 200 men, with his head down, he mumbled almost inarticulately. You could barely hear him. He just walked forward. Apologies for my Geordie accent, but here we go. He said, I did something. I don't know. This is not Geordie now. Whatever's northern. He said, I did something. That'll do. He's from the north. I did something on this XCC that I've never done in my life. And bear in mind, he's 40 something. He's got tattoos all over, and he's weathered. He looks like the hardest man you've ever seen, toughest guy. He just looked up. He said, I asked for help, and he just walked. Thank you, and he just walked off. And it's like a powerful moment, and I can't do it because that face. When you see that face of pain, just saying, I've done the first of my life. I asked for help from other men.
Yeah.
Something about, you talked about before, those generational things. He's broken something in his generation to say, I'm the first guy, 40 years of life, and I asked for help from men.
That's inspiring courage, isn't it? Inspiring courage. I think that's amazing. You know, just to have, for me, it's like when we're talking about masculinity and just listening to you describe, you're just being you. You're just being yourself, and you've learned to embrace yourself, to take responsibility for yourself. But to take inspiration from others as well. For me, that is masculine. That inspires me, and I'm sure will inspire lots of men watching. But it is, that's really true masculinity, is to have the bravery to be yourself and to let other people know you as you are. That terrifies me sometimes. I think, you know, gosh, I'm struggling with this or that or whatever it is at the time that I might be going through. But actually, if I can dare to just still be me, I think people respect that more, and it helps me to have a better relationship with God as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think what you said was really powerful as we connect in weakness. If you just if you just said to us, and you know, hey, nice, James, I'm glad that many men are getting help. I don't really struggle with these things. It makes us say, okay, fine, and you're okay. So who else am I talking to? But when you say what you just said and engage, it frightens me to be honest sometimes. I want to talk to you. I'm thinking straight away, I want to talk to you about that. I want to find out, and how do you find the courage, and how do you do it, and what happens when you do it? Who can you be honest to? And it suddenly opens up another way of conversation where I believe most men actually are desperate to get there, partly through father wound, partly through this kind of male ego, but mostly just through the desire as humans. We just want to connect. We just want to connect, and we connect in weakness. You know, there's that beautiful Bible verse, isn't it, about God's power being made perfect in weakness. It's not through, it's not after, it's in the weakness. And I imagine it like you fall in the mud. While you're lying in the mud, that's the most beautiful moment for people to connect with you, because they can come and help you. You know, I'm fine, and you clear yourself off, and then you walk a bit, and then say, right, now let's connect. I'll tell you about my mud story. Lost some of the effects. I know, but I wanted to be there for you when you were in the mud. And by the way, when I'm in mud, you can come now and help me.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, James. I'd love for you to spend the last sort of 5-10 minutes chatting about your new book, because that must have been quite an adventure itself to write that. Is it the first book you've ever written?
Yeah, I've got a copy here because I don't have anything else to show you. Okay, there it is.
The Authentic Man. Yeah, so tell us about why you decided to write it, who you were hoping to write it for, and sort of a little bit about what's inside.
Thanks. Well, it's the idea behind it actually is really this, that We have it right now in our society, these kind of really polarized views of masculinity. On the one hand, we've got this kind of Andrew Tate style rampant masculinity, which is a reaction to the opposite side, which is the kind of feminist get in your box masculinity, because of the sense of toxic masculinity. And I can see, I get it. I get why we've come here. I can see that men for hundreds of years have abused their power and position. And there is one strong sense which says men deserve to be just brought down a bit and to stop kind of hoarding it. But at the same time, my sons don't deserve that. So I've got this kind of balance in me to say, well, I get why I've made mistakes and should really be more considerate. But I don't get why my children who haven't yet made those mistakes should have to suffer the wrath of that. And linked to that also, the worry is that over here on this side, where you've got this kind of rampant voice about male dominance, the reality is that that's quite attractive for young men if they hear nothing else. In the absence of anything else, it's like, well, I may as well go and do this then. And all of them will think, I'll be better than that. I'll be kinder than that. Don't worry. But they'll still pick up the traits of that. And so the answer for men, I think, is so boring. It's why we overlook it. It really doesn't write headlines. And I think that the two things that men should focus on in life is balance and responsibility. Balance being finding that middle ground between almost every vice you can think of. There's that Victorian saying, I'm not sure whether it's how biblical it is, but I think it's certainly Christian to talk about moderation, everything in moderation. And there's that sense by which, if you talk about alcoholism, or if you talk about power, if you talk about money, if you can say balance, suddenly it just brings it right down to, okay, largely the answer is balance. Find balance. Find a place where it's not one or the other. It's not all or nothing. It's just that place of balance. But at the same time, take responsibility for what's happened to you, what you've brought onto others, and then react to that responsibility. Remember, we talked earlier about the victimhood. Edith Eger wrote a beautiful book called The Choice, which is about how to make decisions based on, it doesn't matter what's happened to you. She was in Auschwitz, and she said you can still have a choice to move your life forward by keys to your freedom. I know Mercy talked about keys to freedom. They're in your own pocket. And so I think something about taking responsibility for my own life, my own thoughts, my own actions. And even after this, if people don't like anything we've said, I'm really open to people writing to me and saying, no, I've really struggled with this, the way you said it. And the chances are I would say, yes, do you know what, if I had my time again, I'd rephrase that, or I would say it differently, or I'd have said more about it. But often I'll say, no, fine, I accept I might have upset you. But that's just the way we might sit. But the reality is I need to take responsibility for what comes out of my mouth, for what I say and do. But I need to find balance also in that process. So this book, the idea of the authentic man, it's just this idea that I don't embody, this is to the point earlier we were discussing, I don't embody authentic malehood, masculinity. I embody a bit of it, but so do you two. So do your father, so do your sons, so do our brothers, so do all these men around us. So does the guy over there, the guy in the coffee shop, right, flower pressing, and the guy who's playing guitar. There's masculinity in so much. And so what we talk about is this idea that the authentic man, it's a bit like chasing the sunset. You can go west and you will see the sun setting, but you might not ever get to the sunset. And so I like that. It's a challenge for all men to become the more authentic version of themselves, more authentic version of masculinity, but don't ever feel like I got there, now I'm the guru. This book is like a conversation on the journey. We're walking with you, talking with you about what we think it is. And the chapters are kind of divided up into the topics, so it's like both and. Remember the balance thing. So the first chapter is both fierce and tender. The idea again a bit tough. I think it is, men are physically bigger than women generally, and cross-culturally, statistically, you can't argue. An elephant is big, a mouse is small. Elephants are bigger and therefore stronger often and more dominant often. So use that strength and dominance. Same for men often. Not in every case, but the exceptions normally prove the rule. And so you can use that physicality for something. You can use it to help, to build, to defend, to protect, to carry, to lift. But also there's no excuse for not developing that tender side. So the biggest man could be the most tender, but equally the tenderest man can also make himself fiercer, make himself braver, stand up for himself a bit more, speak up against injustice, speak up on behalf of those. So there's a sense by which those chapters each, we have right and wrong, connected and abandoned, which is about friendship, fun and healthy, first and last, and both father and son. The idea that all men are both those things simultaneously. I think it's time we father boys in society, even just by helping to fix their bike, or just by leading the scout group, or just by taking them to school, whatever it might be. We actually take responsibility for all those things. So that's the book, and that's what it's about.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, sounds incredible. Any last thoughts, Paul?
God, no, I'm just absolutely blown away that you're sharing your journey with us, and I appreciate it. That's what we want to encourage everybody. Why we want people to come on the Freedom Course is to become the best version of yourself in Christ, and to be okay when you're not okay, and take that. Just thank you so much for sharing with us.
Yeah, James, someone's that's been on XCC has jumped onto the YouTube comments, and I feel like it's worth reading out. It says, "I've done XCC and it changed my life massively. I'm now with God and I owe everything to all the men I've seen and done it with. A huge thanks, James. I want to thank you too, brother." Yeah, and I want to add my own thanks. I feel like there's been something about the manner that you've spoken about this stuff, the tone you've used, the words you've used, the balance that you have brought through everything, the vulnerability, the authenticity, the humility. It's felt very healing, actually, to kind of just hear it and to hear it presented like that from someone that's doing the kind of work you're doing. So just a personal thank you. I've really appreciated your words and how you framed everything. And I've got no doubt that the people listening now and the people that will listen will benefit from that as well. So thank you, James. Any parting words on this issue, or anything you feel like you haven't had a chance to touch on?
It's been an honor, really, and genuinely the three of us should become better friends. I'll write to you after this, but also for those watching and listening, this is a little bit of what masculinity should be. It should be guys holding each other to account. Oh, the window cleaner's just arrived. And oh no, and it should be a little bit of that. Oh, it's Rob Harvey. This guy's a bit of a...
Right.
Here we go. Are you going to be live in the studio?
Yeah.
Rob's actually going to co-host for a bit. He's
oh, well, here we go. You're going. Listen, I should have shut up earlier and let him speak. This man knows a lot about what it means to embody all these things. But I think that's it. This is just healthy masculinity. And the tragedy, I think, is for all those people watching, listening, for us in our own lives, all those men we know who don't have anything like this and have never experienced anything like this. It's no wonder they're frightened and aggressive. It's no wonder that they're lonely and sad and depressed. It's no wonder that our young men are struggling. So the challenge is for us men to be more like this more often, to be more like this more openly, and to invite them in and say, come, you can come. It doesn't matter how big or small or left or right or up or down you are. Just join in and come and join our conversation. But there are some parameters. We are men. We are a bit fierce, but we're also super tender. And so holding those two things together, I think is the call for us men. So thanks for doing this podcast. I really hope you last to the end. But now you're going to have a great chat with Rob, so he's going to tell you more about all this stuff.
Well, Rob's actually going to do his spot in about 2 hours' time. He's coming to come. He's coming to kind of help hold the fort.
Good man.
Much because you'll know as much as anyone, James. Rob has championed this stuff for a long, long time, and within Mercy as well. So it felt right that we made sure that he was here for a part of that. And you've done XCC?
I've done XCC many times. I think 8 or 9 times. So
amazing,
yeah,
right?
I can hand on heart say that James is the real deal. I'm always very jealous of his hair. But no, he's the real deal. And it is a genuine mind, body, soul connection when you go. So
Hi, Trevor. No, you're fine, Trevor. Don't go. You're fine. Stay with us.
I'm not going anywhere. Hi.
I saw the panic in his eyes. I was like, I'm in the right place.
I pressed the button.
Hey, we've got quite a gathering now, haven't we? This is amazing.
Yeah.
Love it.
I'm just happy that High Wycombe's being repped twice.
Yeah. Amazing. James, thank you so much for your time. I mean, you're welcome to stay on, but you've also given us an hour. So thank you so much for everything you're doing.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, guys, so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
See ya.
I hope you guys well. Take care.
Yeah, thanks, James.